Fire gives you that independence that, okay, I have the money, I choose not to work. Once your job or your career starts to feel like a knife in the back, first thing that you do is, boss, you take the knife out.
Right.
I took a call to retire at 33x. So that was my personal number.
Okay. So I took that decision, but on the day of resigning, I got cold feet.
Fantasy that where I do something and then money keeps on coming automatic.
And I actually did not retire. I did not resign. I kept working on. And till now, I have not been able to take that step again.
Everyone in my class is far richer than I am. It does put you down at points of time, but again, part of life, man. There is nothing that I can do to change it. None of my startups or ESOPs have had an exit, or I've never made money in crypto. I've always lost money. So firing in India for NRIs is going to be a lot easier than firing in the US.
I was also very interested in the concept of fire, and but I didn't really understand how to do it and what it really means in real life. I hope a lot of people who are in US will find it very interesting. We can
Fair.
start from a brief intro about you, how you ended
Sure.
up with this fire system. What was the motivation behind it?
It was a couple of things. One is that I have been sort of a lazy person throughout my life, and for a very, very long time, I had this sort of fantasy that do something and then money keeps on coming automatically. I got into this bug, I think, in early 2000s. As some of your gray hair show, you would remember Blogspot and LiveJournal and those
Yeah.
things. So that was my first brush with money, first understanding with money, where you create something and then the money keeps on flowing automatically. Maybe it was just $2 a month.
Yeah.
So sort of understood that you can keep on working to make money, or you can create something which makes money for you. That's the reason why I got onto YouTube fairly early. So I started making videos on YouTube, I believe in 2008 is when I made my first YouTube video. I wrote a book in 2011, hoping that the book sale would be able to generate that money. It did become a bestseller, but after it became a bestseller, I realized authors don't make anything in terms of, in India, it's really, really poor, the margins
So
for
it it
authors. In
it,
20,
it became bestseller in paper version.
yes, paper version. So
Oh, something like what Chetan Bhagat does.
no. So Chetan Bhagat is essentially, you're talking about the Sachin Tendulkar.
Okay. A lot of people are trying to go towards the fire concept that you teach yourself, and I think you have followed it in your life yourself. So, to guy, I was reading online, there are websites like Investopedia and other websites which define the fire in certain terms, specifically in US. Like they say that you have to save up to 70% of your income, you have to be frugal, you have to save pretty much everything that you can and reduce your expenses, and then you can aim to retire by like maybe age 40 or 45 to live your life keeping in mind the same kind of expenses. You don't increase your expenses by buying a very upgraded car or something like that. So if you keep your expenses lifestyle at the same level, then you can pretty much live off your life with the savings you saved maybe by working 15 years. Is that the correct statement?
Fair. I think so. The numbers are broadly okay. The only thing that I would like to add here is, anything done at an extreme becomes a problem,
Okay.
which is what I have seen a lot of fire enthusiasts do. Obviously, you should try and save money. Obviously, you should try to, not live beyond your means. These are good practices. There is no one who is challenging that. But if you become frugal to such an extent that it starts impacting your quality of life, I don't think that is a good idea. So you figure out what is important to you, you figure out what is not important to you, and then you decide on what areas you are going to spend money on. One of my favorite examples that I like to give is, I don't really enjoy driving in
Mm-hmm.
particular. The traffic and the roads in
Mm-hmm.
India. And I have had the same car since 2016. So it's 8 years. And it's not really a fancy car. It's a Honda City, which is a mid range or a mid range car in India. Even though I can afford a significantly better one. Why I don't do that is because in 8 years I've driven something like 35,000 kilometers. So I drive 4,000, 5,000 kilometers in a
Mm-hmm.
year. There are friends of mine who drive 4,000 kilometers in a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter to me. So I don't really spend on that. On the other hand, I have other, hobbies or tastes or whatever you want to call it. For example, I really like single malt
Mm-hmm.
whiskeys, which cost a lot more than the regular whiskey. So there I spend money because that is something that I enjoy. So figuring out, so when you talk about being frugal, people take it to an extreme that they will cut down on anything and everything and because they'll take the joy out of your
Mm-hmm.
life. Money at the end of the day is important, but it is still a tool.
Right.
It is a vehicle to do things that you want to do, be it with your time, be it with how you consume, how you live your life, the house that you have. You should definitely live below your means, but that doesn't mean that you start compromising on quality of life. So that becomes a problem
Mm-hmm.
with the fire movement, with people who become too frugal. The idea is yes, if you can save anything 50% or above of your net take home salary, you are in a good space. Maybe you will be able to retire in 10 years, maybe you will be able to do it in 15 years, maybe you will be able to do it in 12 years, depending upon how the market behaves. Because you save all this money, it shouldn't really lie in your savings
Right.
accounts or your checking account. It has to be invested. Where will you invest it? You are bound to invest it in the equity markets because that's the only place which is A, well regulated, and B, beats inflation over the long
Mm-hmm.
term. There are other avenues where you can invest in. There is real estate or cryptocurrency or startups and all of those. But all of those have their
Mm-hmm.
problems. Equity markets are the only place where you can sort of transfer your responsibility, transfer your decision making to someone else. That boss, this is my money. You take the money and then you decide where to
Mm-hmm.
invest it. Now, you can do it by the mutual fund route where you pick up a mutual fund manager who does it for you. You can hire an investment advisor who does it for you. Or you can take the index fund route where let the market decide. You can invest in a low cost index fund. So, India has Nifty 50 index funds as an example. US has Vanguard has in the US the S&P 500 funds. Give your money to them, hope for the best, and over a 10-year, 12-year, 15-year period, your investments are bound to do well. And if they do really well, if you catch the lucky cycle, say for example, if you catch the lucky cycle in India, 2020 to 2024, last 4 years have been really, really good. If you catch that lucky cycle, instead of 16 years, you might be able to retire in 12.
Okay.
You save as much as you can, you invest in equity as much as you can, and let someone smarter than you decide where to invest the money in equity. People try doing it on their own, which is that, oh, I know that Facebook is going to do well, or I know that Reliance is going to do well, and I buy Facebook shares or Reliance shares. Sometimes it works brilliantly, sometimes it doesn't. On the other hand, if you take the index fund route, the probability of it doing well is significantly higher.
Right.
And once you hit that number, okay, so this is the amount of money that I need to retire. Once you hit that number, then you can just pull the plug.
So, is there any formula? Because I have seen a lot of videos where they give you like multiply by 400, some say multiply by 30 to reach one specific number, which should give you the retirement amount. Basically, that amount should be somewhere in your bank, and that day you can just write your resignation letter.
Fair. So there are two things
Uh-huh.
to it, especially for early retirees who are concerned, because most early retirees will have two, three big expenses which would be lined up in their
Mm-hmm.
life. For example, a lot of people in the 40 to 50 range will not own their own
Mm-hmm.
house. Even the ones who do will not own it in the city they are planning to retire in.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you will have a lot of people who are from Delhi, but they are working in
Mm-hmm.
Bangalore or they are working in San Jose and they want to retire in Delhi. They might own a real estate in San Jose or in Bangalore, but they don't own it in Delhi.
Right.
So that expense of the house needs to be figured out. That if you're going to retire in Delhi or if you're going to retire in Jaipur or XYZ any city, do you own a house? If you don't, you need to plan for that particular money. That's one aspect. A lot of people in the 40-50 range will not have kids who have gone to college. So they need to plan expenses for that. A lot of people will also want to finance the marriage of their children. So they need money for that. So these are all big one time expenses. That is one chunk of money that you need. So let's say that one chunk of money, you keep that aside. Over and above that, which is your living expenses, that is where the formula comes into the picture.
Okay.
Because how big a house that you will need, there is no formula for that. How do you
Right.
calculate? How much will you need to spend on your kids' college? There is no formula for
Okay.
that. So those things you need to figure out on your own. Other than
Mm-hmm.
that, for your day-to-day living expenses and travel and cars and all of that, you figure out how much do you spend in a year. So suppose you buy a car worth $20,000 every five
Mm-hmm.
years, roughly. So that means annualized cost is
Mm-hmm.
$4,000. Suppose you spend, you know, $1,000 on food and groceries every
Mm-hmm.
quarter. So you multiply that with four, so that becomes an annualized cost of $4,000. So whatever are your regular expenses, you take two vacations a year or you take one vacation every 2 years, annualize all your costs and your annual expenses come out as X. Then comes the multiple part. Some people believe that 25x or 25 times your annual income or 21 times your 25 times your annual expenses is good enough in the range of 35-year-old to 50-year-old. Some people believe it to be 40 times your annual expenses in this age range. No one knows what the real answer is because you don't know how the markets are going to behave,
Okay.
and especially how the markets are going to behave in the first 2 3 years of your retirement.
Okay.
I personally took a call to retire at 33x, so that was my personal number,
Okay.
33. But you look at all the research that exists on this, the number will land up somewhere between 25 to 40.
Okay.
So 33x worked for me because I retired in 22, and the last 2 years have been really, really good in terms of how the markets have performed. Now, if with 33x I had retired in the US in 1928,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when the depression started. So if I had just retired in 1928, just before the depression started, it would have been a problem. If I retired in 1988 in Japan with 33x sort of a number, it would have been a problem. But that is why people want to build more and more and more safety. But that also becomes a problem. If you know how much is enough, you will never. So once you get to 33, you will think about, okay, let's get to 35
Right.
times. Once you get to 35 times, you'll start thinking, okay, let's just get to 40 times. I have a friend who is literally sitting at 100 times of his annual expenses and he's still scared about it because, as he says, what if I end up making some wrong investments and half of it gets wiped off, which is very much possible.
Right. Right.
So, you know, somewhere you need to decide when you can pull the plug. And I believe more than the money part, you need to pull the plug when you hate the job
Okay.
or you don't really like the career that you are in. See, even if you hate the job, you can still change companies, you can change cities. But what happens and I'm seeing this happening with a lot of 40. I am 40, and I'm seeing this happening with a lot of my friends. That jobs and careers that we liked and enjoyed when we were
Hmm.
30, we don't really like them as much at 40 anymore.
Right, right,
We we have very different sort of pressures at 40 than we had at 30. We don't have the same sort of energy or motivation. We are not, you know, and there is a very rising trend, at least in Indian tech. It's not really going to be that easy to find a job at 45,
right, right,
as easy it was, So you were a software engineer in early 2000s, mid 2000s, at the age of 25. There were plenty of jobs available. There were plenty of high paying jobs which were available compared to the market. At 45, when you're already earning, a pretty high salary, it's not going to be that easy to find a job.
right,
So this early retirement thing, in some cases, it's going to become a necessity. It will no longer be a choice because you will not be able to compromise on the sort of job that you want or career that you want. And once you start compromising on that, you start hating your job, you start hating your career, you start hating the field that you are in.
right,
And that is when I believe you should pull the plug and retire. If you are in a job or in a career, forget liking it and loving it. If you do not hate it, just continue doing it, man. There is no point pulling the plug if you don't hate your job, because sitting at home doing nothing is not an easy thing to do. Not everyone can do it.
right, right. Yeah, that was my next question, because if you decide to pull the plug, you have to do something, right? You can't just sit on the beach and sip beer all day, or you can't just go to cafe and keep drinking coffee and reading newspaper. You will do something, right? Something or the other thing, like maybe following your passion of cooking, or but how much will you cook unless you make something out of it, like maybe make videos and put it on YouTube, and then you will start getting into the pressure of getting likes, views, and then you will try to find a video editor. You will try to find some kind of, you will create a, you know, setup where you will get into that business side of those things, and then you will find yourself again working 9 to 5, or maybe more than 9 to 5 in that case. So yeah, that was the other thing. So the expenses part that you're talking about, it's a combined like saving of the husband and the wife that will work,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
unless you
absolutely.
get divorced
Because,
in later in life, and then you have to
sure. So
restart.
I very often, like to say that my early retirement plan, there are only two
Uh-huh.
things. I'm so well prepared and everything is so organized. There are only two things which can force me out of
Uh-huh.
retirement. A is if I get
Uh-huh.
divorced, then the money would go. B, if I have another kid.
Okay.
So I have one kid right now. Because having a divorce and having a kid are really, really expensive things. And
Right.
these two things can really ruin your retirement plans. The ups and downs of the markets, I believe I have enough money to take care of the ups and downs in the market. And B, I believe I'm financially savvy enough to take care of the ups and downs of the markets
Right.
as in when they go. I'm not so confident about that if I will be able to handle the expenses which come in with another kid or the expenses which come in with a divorce that
Okay.
well.
So when we,
So those challenges
yeah,
are
when
there.
we talk about, let's say, for example, let's take a number like 1 crore Indian rupees is what is needed. I've calculated by doing like, let's say 40 times my expenses, the number comes out to be 1 crore. Now I invest this 1 crore in some kind of like some kind of mutual fund, maybe Nifty 50, or in US we call it S&P 500.
So, your 1 crore number is peanuts,
Okay.
to be really, really
Okay.
honest. It's not going to get you anywhere in India.
No,
So,
no.
the
So
number,
what?
yeah.
So I'm just taking 1 crore as a easy number to calculate. I mean, just to stick in the mind. It could be any number. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's say, if you want to
Mhm.
analyze it, I would say let's assume the number of years of expenses. So suppose the amount of money that you have is 30x plus y.
Mhm.
Let's keep that as the
Okay.
formula, where 30x is 30 times your annual expenses, and y is the amount of money that you need for your long term goals, such as your kids' education, or buying a house, or kids' wedding, or world tour, or whatever. So, how do you actually invest it? There are multiple ways that you can
Mhm.
do it. The simplest possible way to do it is you put all of that money in a balance fund or a hybrid fund or something like that. Now, what these guys do is they will put a multi asset fund. They'll take your money and then they will decide, okay, out of this 100 rupees, how much money should I put in gold? How much money should I put in bonds? How much money should I put in equity markets? Not only they will decide that, they will also decide that, okay, so if I have to put in bonds, should I buy a bank FD with it? Should I buy a sovereign bond with it? Should I buy a corporate bond with it? If I have to invest it in stocks, they will decide, okay, which company's stocks to buy. So that's probably the simplest way, that you give all your money to someone else and let him take care of it.
Okay.
Not the best possible way, because taxes will be a problem. When the market fluctuates, you might not be able to take out the money that well. The strategy that I have been using is essentially a bucket strategy. What I mean by the bucket strategy is I figure out how much money I'm going to need when. It's very, very difficult to know exactly how much you will need, but what you do get is a rough idea of how much money are you going to need in the next 2, 3, 4 years. For example, if you are planning a world tour in the next 2, 3, 4 years, you would know that, okay, fine, I'll maybe go on a world
Mhm.
tour in the next 2, 3, 4 years. If you're planning to buy a car, I'll probably buy a car, or I'll probably buy a house in the next 2, 3, 4 years. You figure out how much money are you going to need in the next 2, 3, 4 years. You invest that in very safe assets and very liquid assets. So both things are extremely important, that A, they should be very, very safe, and B, they should be very, very liquid, because you need to consume this money. Some of the options which are available for this are, there are, you can keep it in the savings account, to be really honest. But if you keep it in the savings account, you don't make anything on it, and it's a
In
substantial
fact,
money.
in
Yeah,
fact, you do lose money.
to
Yeah.
inflation, you lose money. So it's not really a great idea. But anyways, it's just 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of your expenses out of your 30 times
Okay.
pie. So your total pie is 30x.
Okay.
So even it's just 2x, 3x, 4x. You lose some of it, but you're losing on a very small portion, so you don't really care
Okay.
that. But you can optimize it. There are instruments such as debt funds which are available to help
Mhm.
you with this. There are debt mutual funds, liquid mutual funds, ultra short funds. There are bonds which are available that you can use. There are short term bonds, and there are a bunch of instruments which are available. Personally speaking, I have kept most of this money in ultra short term and short term bond fund by various fund houses. So that is the liquid money that you need. Then comes, so this is the short term liquidity bucket, cash bucket, short term bucket. Then comes the medium term bucket. In the medium term bucket, you can typically have around 4 to 6 years of expenses. And maybe I'll come back to it later. Before that, I'll like to talk about your rest of the money, which is, 2, 3, 4 years gone in cash, 5, 6 years gone in medium term. And then there is the long term bucket, which is invested in equity over the long term. So your two-thirds of your portfolio, or maybe even more than that, 60%, 70% of your portfolio goes and gets invested. Now, what's the logic behind this is that you keep on consuming money from your short-term bucket. You buy a car, you buy it from the short-term bucket. You want to pay for food, you pay it from the short-term bucket. You want to go on a vacation, you go from the short-term bucket. As you keep on consuming that, the short-term bucket will keep on reducing.
Mhm.
If the markets do well, then your long-term bucket, which was maybe 60% of your portfolio, your short-term bucket is reducing. Your long-term bucket, if the market is doing well, will
Yeah.
grow to maybe from 60 to 62 to 65 and all that. A, that is growing, and this is reducing. So what you do is, if the number becomes, let's say if from 60% you started, it becomes 67, 66%, you transfer some money to the liquidity bucket. And then you started with 4 years, it came down to three, it came down to two. You refill that bucket, it is back up to four. And you keep on doing that as long as your markets keep on doing that. And how would you know that the markets are doing well? Well, your long term bucket, the percentage share of your long term bucket would keep on growing. And you keep on doing that as long as the markets keep doing well. Over a 4 year period, if you look at the history of the Indian stock markets or the US stock markets, over a 4 year period, in broadly 60%, 70%, 80% of the cases, markets do well over a 4 year period. They'll give you positive returns over a 4 year period, but not always. There will be periods, there will be long periods. There will be 5 year bear markets. There will be 10 year bear markets when the markets do nothing. In that period, you cannot sell your long term bucket because it has already gone down. Your cash pile is finishing because from 4 years, you can consuming it 3 years, 2 years, and all. In those long term bear markets, is your medium term comes into the picture, the 5, 6 years.
Okay.
Suppose you are 40 right now, and in the next 40 years, okay, it's very unlikely you will not have a long bear market. But let's say if there is no bear market of 5 years, 6 years in the
Mm-hmm.
remaining part of your life, then you never touch the medium term bucket. You only touch the medium term bucket once it has been a long term 5 year bear market. And there have been 5 year bear markets. Let's say in India, I think there has been just one period, I think 2005 to 2015, or maybe 2003 to 2013 was a 10-year phase where the markets didn't return, didn't give any sort of positive return. But that is when you start taking out money from the medium term bucket. So that's the purpose of the medium term bucket. That in case of bad times, this is where you withdraw the money from. Which brings to the next idea that, okay, so then how do you invest in it? Your long term goals are very clear. You want the money to grow as fast as possible. So you invested in equities, you invested in assets which beat inflation. Your short term goals are very clear that money should be safe and liquid. The medium term goal should be, it should have a little bit of safety, a little bit of liquidity, and it should match inflation.
Okay.
So short-term bucket, you don't give, you don't care about inflation. You care about liquidity and safety. Long-term bucket, you don't really care that much about liquidity. You care about, beating inflation and long-term growth. Medium term does both of those things because you will need to use it in bear market, a long-term bear market. Which brings to the question that, okay, what are the instruments that you
Right, right.
use
That was my
for
next
this?
question.
So that is where, in the beginning I said that, you give all your money to a mutual fund who will decide which assets to invest in, and multi-asset funds and balance
Uh-huh.
funds and all of that. So that is where this medium term bucket comes into the picture. You give all your money to someone who will invest it in various assets depending upon how the markets are doing. And because his goal is aligned to your goal, his goal is that, okay, I don't want to get the maximum number of
Mm-hmm.
returns, and I don't want it to be ultra safe.
Okay.
If he wanted to be ultra safe, he will just buy FDs.
Right.
If he wanted ultimate growth, he would just buy equities. The reason of buying multi asset funds, hybrid funds is this, that you are letting the fund manager decide for you that, boss, A, keep it safe also, B, keep it grow also. I don't want hyper growth. I want little bit of growth. I want inflation matching. Other option that you can use for it is, I don't really know if this option exists in the US, but in India there exists something called gilt funds,
Okay.
which are long term government securities. So you buy a 10-year bond from RBI.
Okay.
RBI is going to give you that,
Uh-huh.
right now the 10-year bond yields are around 7.5%, where government inflation is around 5 to 6%. So they give you a little bit better than the government inflation numbers. But then again, the idea is your inflation and my inflation is always going to be a little bit more than what the government
Right.
inflation is calculated. So Those are instruments that can be used. These are the two instruments that I use. Another really good instrument that people use for it, I don't because I don't understand it, is high dividend yield stocks. So you buy stocks which have a very high dividend yield.
Uh-huh.
They keep on giving you some sort of cash flows. Typically, stocks which give out high dividends are established companies over a period of 50 years and 100 years, and they have a very strong track record in history. They are not going to be your Facebook or Nvidia, which is going to become 3x in a year or anything like that. But they will keep on giving you consistent returns.
Okay.
At least that's what the theory says. I don't understand it. I can never pick individual stocks this way, but there are people who pick it, and I do believe if you have the capability of picking good quality, high dividend yield stocks, then they find a place in your medium term
Okay.
bucket because A, they will give you the yield, and B, they will broadly match inflation
Okay.
numbers.
And what should be the percentage division between short term, medium term, and long term buckets?
I don't really think, yeah, so I don't really think it is dependent on, what percentages you should
Okay.
keep in. It depends upon how much money you have.
Okay.
So in the short term bucket, I believe anything from 2 years to 4 years of expenses is
Like
enough.
something like what
In the
let's say that I need 10,000 rupees per month. So like 120K per year. So it becomes like
So
roughly
120K per year, so
4
maybe
lakhs, 400K.
4 lakhs,
Yeah.
400K is what goes in the short
Okay.
term bucket. Very similarly, for the medium term, to a 6 year number
Okay.
that goes in the next one.
Okay.
Because, so suppose you take the lower limits of
Mm-hmm.
these. So the lower limits are 2 years and 4 years. That means you will be able to survive a 6 year bear market
Okay.
because you will not have to sell equity for 6 year period. You will not be forced
Okay.
to sell. If you take the 4 year and a 6 year limit, then you will have a 10-year window to take care of the bear market.
Okay.
So you will keep on eating from it in case of a long-term bear market.
Okay.
The rest of it, the rest of it goes into your long-term bucket.
Okay.
So suppose you have 30 years of expenses
Mm-hmm.
with you when you decide to pull the plug. Then your short-term bucket, you take it as three. You take your medium-term bucket as suppose five, and you take the rest of it as or 4, 6, and 20. If that is the split that you have, then your long-term bucket essentially has 66.66%,
Mm-hmm.
and your short-term bucket has 4 out of 30, so around what 13.33 odd percent is going in there, and maybe around 6 years on 30 is what 20% is going in there.
Okay.
So 13, 20, and 66.66 is the percentages with 30x. But it doesn't mean that you maintain the same percentages. Suppose you have 50x
Mm-hmm.
of your annual expense. Even then, your short term bucket will still be 4 years.
Okay.
Your medium term bucket will still be 6 years. But your long term bucket will be 40x.
Right.
So numbers which were 13, 20, and 66 will now be, 8% and 8% and 12% and 80%.
Okay.
So don't think of it in percentage terms. Think of it in number of years of expenses terms. 2 to 4 years for short term, 4 to 6 years for medium term. Everything else, whatever money you have, goes in the long term bucket.
Okay. That's pretty deep understanding. I never thought about it from this point of view that you have explained with short term, medium, and long term. It's pretty easy to visualize now what I should do.
It makes financial sense because if you go ahead by percentage
Hmm.
routes, you know, you might end up with a lot of money in the short term bucket, which you are not going to use in the short term.
Right.
Suppose you have 50x and you follow a 20-20-60 sort of a
Hmm.
thing. That means in your short term bucket, at 20% of 50x is 10x.
Hmm.
You'll have 10 years of expenses in the short term bucket. Why will you keep 10 years in the short term? Yeah, 10 years is not the short term.
Right.
And the money can be in 10 years, if you keep it in short term, it is earning maybe a 5%, 6%, 7%, whereas it could be in equity earning a lot higher.
Right.
So you can't really decide based upon percentages. You have to decide based upon your expenses, based upon when you need the money.
Right.
And this will also give you a very important picture if you have enough money or not. Because if your long term money comes out to be really, really small, suppose you decide to retire with 20 years of
Uh-huh.
expenses. No one does that, but suppose you
Mm-hmm.
do. And you have 4 years and six
Mm-hmm.
years in the first two buckets and 10 years in the last bucket. Next year, the market falls by 50%. You're messed up
Right.
because your 4 years would have come down to three
Uh-huh.
years. You have consumed 1 year. Your 6 years, let's say it stays at six, but your 10 has come down to five. So now, 3 plus 6 plus 5, you are just down to 14, 15 years of expenses. You have a 30-year, 40-year lifespan. You cannot live it on 13 years of expenses. So it would be a problem. And that is why people say that, at least 30 is the number that you go ahead with.
So basically, this 30 means
And
the number of years you expect to live after your retirement. Is it?
not really. No, not really, because it is 30 times the annual expenses. Because when you are
Uh-huh.
younger, so let's say if you are
Uh-huh.
40 versus you are 60, at 40, you're giving a lot of time for your money to compound as well.
Okay.
The At 60, suppose you live from 60 to
Mm-hmm.
90. Now, 60 to 70, 60 to 70, you're using your short term buckets, etc. Your long term bucket does not have that long to compound.
Right.
At 40, a lot of your money is going to remain invested for a period of 30 years, 40 years, 50
Uh-huh.
years. Suppose you live from 40 to 90, your money is going to be invest. Some money will be invested for 0 years, some money will be invested for 50 years, but on an average, your money will remain invested for
Right.
25 years. So the chances of it growing and it beating inflation and all of that are a lot higher compared to when you are 60. Because if you live from 60 to 90, your money is going to remain invested for a period of 30 years. Some for zero, some for 30.
Right.
Let's take the middle as 15.
Okay.
So this 30x sort of a number, it works if you are 60, it works if you are 50, it works if you are 40.
Okay.
So that's not really an issue. But yeah, getting to that 30 years, 35 years of expenses, that's
Real
the
challenge.
challenge.
So,
And all of this is with the assumption your first 2, 3 years are nice.
okay.
Because if the market falls drastically in your first 2 years, then it can create a lot of problems if you don't have much buffer.
Okay.
So some people, what happens is, and it's very understandable, a lot of people will hit that number, hit that peak during a bull
Mm-hmm.
market because stocks would have risen.
Right.
So if you hit that peak in a bull market, then you retire and then it just falls by
Okay.
40%, can be
So what?
problematic.
So you're essentially saying that we should have some kind of backup so that we can safely harbor that like beer period of 4 to 5 years. That's probably the maximum, right? The worst case scenario is maybe 4 to 5 years. So if you have that kind of money in the emergency fund that you can live through those 4 5 years, you'll still come out okay.
That's the short term bucket. That's the medium
Okay.
term bucket. So you
Okay.
can call it an emergency. See, an emergency fund is a more appropriate term for people who are earning right
Okay.
now. Suppose you lose your
Uh-huh.
job, then you need to dip into your emergency fund to take care of your expenses till you get your job back, till that emergency goes
Okay.
away. A bear market is not an emergency.
Okay.
Stock market's not doing well is not an emergency. That's something that you need to be prepared for, and these buckets help you prepare for it. And then the other idea is for an early retiree,
Mm-hmm.
your buffer is you, man. See, you need to have talent to have made that amount of money. You need to have had a good career to have made that amount of
Hmm.
money at 40, at 45, at 50,
Right.
even. So if your first 2 or 3 years are bad, you can always find some way to make more money. You're not that old that you will not get any other job. Yes, if you're earning $200,000 right now, you're not going to take a 2 year break. You will still get another job of $200,000. That's not going to
Hmm.
happen. But you will still get a job of $100,000
Okay.
of half your earlier salary. So, whatever life throws at you, you will be able to claw your way back fairly easily because you will still be young as an early retiree. So that's not really a challenge. That's one.
Okay.
Second is a lot of people have some form of inheritance coming their way. I'm not going to say that it's going to be significant for a lot of people, but very few people have come from such a background and then able to get to a position of fire where they get zero inheritance, so to say. So they'll have a parent's house, they will have some funds which would be there, so that can also act as a buffer at some point of time, because let's be honest, in all probability, your parents are going to die before you, you are going to die before your children, and all of that. The other thing is, over a period of time, and at least most of the fire enthusiasts that I have spoken with, they would have taken some 10x bets in their
Hmm.
life. So some of them would have taken bets in crypto being an example. Some of them would have, taken bets in startups as an example. Some of them would have worked in startups where they have the ESOPs, where the ESOPs have not been
Hmm.
materialized. So all of these, and you talk to anyone, even if he has invested in crypto, even if they have invested in startups, they don't count that as a part of this pool. And you should not count all of those risky investments as a part of this 30x, because crypto, I don't know what will happen to it, but potentially it can go to zero in a couple of
Right.
years. Startups, ESOPs, again, you don't know what's going to happen to a unicorn today, but a unicorn today can be 0 2 years down the line.
Hmm.
So people don't consider that as a part of their corpus, but that also becomes a buffer. Personally, when I talk about that, okay, I got to 33x and I pull the plug, that 33x is there. Over and above that, my buffer is that I have very small portfolio in crypto. I have a very small portfolio of startups as well, where I've made angel investments and I've worked and gained ESOPs. I consider all of them as zero, because till date, all of them have given me back zero. None of my startups or ESOPs have had an exit, or I've never made money in crypto. I've always lost money in crypto, but it's there. One of those things might work. So those sort of buffers, you by the time you're 40, 45, you would have built some sort of buffer somewhere or the
Okay. So
other.
it's
So I don't really think it's going to be a challenge. If you get to 30x, 35x, somewhere in that range, money is not going to be a problem.
okay.
Problems are going to come from elsewhere.
Okay.
Problems are going to be the society. Problem is going to be, your mom yelling at you. Why are you sitting at home all day? Or your wife yelling at you, or your kid asking you, okay, what do you do all day? So those challenges will
So
be there. Money
so
is
the
not going to be
problem
a
will
challenge.
shift from the job to what to do. That the question what to do
What to do?
whole day. Okay. And one more
Yes.
part of 30x that I was thinking is you should account for the capital gain tax or whatever kind of tax the government charges. You should add that as well to your number, right?
No, not really, because I don't really know what the numbers in the US
Uh-huh.
are, but in India, especially for the tax bracket that I fall in the expenses that I have. So I have my expenses in India will be close to 20 lakhs a
Mhm.
year. And me and my wife, both of us can have 7.5 lakhs of income every year, which would be tax
Mhm.
free. So, and you can very easily adjust a lot of these taxes depending upon the instruments that you
Mhm.
have. 20 lakhs of expenses in India as of 2024, you can very easily get away with almost zero tax right now, zero or very less 5% tax. And even if you have to pay capital gains tax on equity, it's very fairly low at 10% right now.
Okay.
So at least for someone in my position who's spending 20 lakh rupees a year, couple of people with properly managed investments, taxes are not an issue.
Okay.
If you're and 20 lakhs is a pretty decent amount to spend in a year in India. It will probably put me in the top 2%, 3% in terms of spending
Right.
in a year.
Right.
Most people will not even have that. So they will be lower. The lower they are, the lesser they need to worry about
Right.
taxes. So I don't really think taxation makes a lot of difference currently. Rules, Indian tax rules are bound to change.
Yeah.
So if something changes, well, then you modify your numbers. As of now, as of 2024, 30x, 35x sort of a number for a 40-year-old, for a 50-year-old is more than enough. It's not really. Once again, money is not the problem that we should be talking about. That's
Right.
not going to be an issue.
So I read on like I mean on Twitter and Instagram, a lot of influencers say that you know they're just copy pasting some verses from Warren Buffett's book or wherever they read, just they just copy paste to increase engagement. They say that just invest in long term funds and forget forever. I mean, what do they mean by forget forever? You have to use that money while you are on Earth, right? Once you're gone, you're gone. What will happen to that money, it doesn't matter to you at all. So someday you have to sell it, right? So like you're saying that invest something in short term so that you can keep selling the stocks and getting the money and pay the bills like electricity bill, water bill, whatever, xyz bills. There has to be a buy sell cycle that has to come into the picture somewhere, right? It's not only
Absolutely.
buy and then forget forever. I mean, somewhere you have to put in the money as well for your expenses. Otherwise, you can never retire.
I fully agree with you that you will need to sell, but you also need to understand. I don't really disagree with the advice
Uh-huh.
that you are talking about. Yes, you should just continue to buy because you have an income.
Right,
As long as you have an income and you're saving half of your income, so that means if you are able to save half of your income, you are in a very very comfortable
right,
position. First thing that you should do is get some sort of emergency fund in place. That the fund that we were talking about, maybe 1 year of expenses in it, maybe 2 years of expenses in it. So let's say if both the husband and the wife are working and both of them are earning broadly the same amount, then they don't need that much of an emergency fund. So suppose you are making $100,000, your wife is making $100,000, and your expenses are $100,000.
hmm,
That means you are saving 50% of the
right,
income. The emergency fund that you would need will be very insignificant,
right,
because possible that you lose your job, your wife is still bringing in 100K and that you can live off
right,
that. If your wife loses your job, you are still bringing in 100K and as a family you can live
right,
on that. On the other hand, if it is just you who is making that
mhm,
200,000 and you are spending that 100,000, then you will need a much bigger emergency
right,
fund, because if you lose your job, you still need to fund that 100K of expenses. How are you going to do
right,
that? So, so that's the first thing. Figure out what sort of emergency fund you need. Get that in place. Once you have that, I fully agree with the idea that you just keep on buying and buying and buying very long term assets. Uh, Index funds are a very, very good long term asset. They have very low cost. You just keep buying till the period, let's say, when you are 5 years away from retirement.
okay,
Let's consider that. So you will broadly know, if you're 40 right now, you will know that, okay, can I retire by 45? There is a chance, there is a possibility. Or at 40, you will know, boss, whatever happens at 45, it's not going to happen for me. Either I don't want to, or I don't have the money for whatever
right,
reason. You will broadly, once you are in striking distance, and 5 years is a long time, it's not really striking distance. Once you're 5 years away from retirement, That is when you need to optimize for all this stuff, the short term stuff, and maybe have some gold in your portfolio so that it is hedged against equity. uh, I forgot to mention in the medium term part, I also have some gold in the medium term part,
Okay.
because gold essentially as an asset matches inflation. And if the equity markets are doing well, I don't really need to sell that gold. That gold will keep on continuing. But if there is a long term bear market, why will there be a long term bear market? Something is wrong in the world. That is why there is a long term bear
Mhm.
market. In that long term bear market, gold is bound to do well.
Okay.
So that is when I will sell
Okay.
gold.
So
That's also there as a part of the medium term bucket for handling the long term bear
okay.
phase.
So
But all of this, your portfolio of short term, medium term, long term, and etc., it's very important that you build it. I'm not denying it. But should you build it at 25 or 35 or 45 or 55 is not the question. You should build it when you are 5 years away from retirement.
right. So basically,
So,
if you have some kind of money source that is giving you monthly income or whatever, then you can think about only buying and buying and buying. But once you have retired, you have to plan for selling as well regularly to get the monthly expenses amount in your pocket, right? Otherwise, you will be
true.
forced to do some kind of job once again to fund that, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
that was my thing.
So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm saying that you don't flip the switch in one
Right.
day.
Okay.
So you plan this over a period of 5 years. So right now, if you're 40, think about whether you will be retiring at
Mhm.
45. If the answer is a clear no, just keep buying. If the answer is yes, please go and talk to a financial advisor who can plan your portfolio and have a look at that and do things with it. If the answer is a maybe, well, you start building, if nothing else, some sort of a debt portfolio, a bond portfolio, a fixed income portfolio, whatever you want to call it. So the decision is not really based on age. The decision should be based on when you think your income will stop. Voluntary or involuntary, we don't know why income will stop. So you can get into an accident and lose a hand tomorrow, and then your income stops. That's also possible.
Right. Right.
But so plan it 5 years before the income stops. You don't know when the income is going to stop.
Right. Right. Okay. That's very technical and very detailed, I would say. I had no idea about fire before today. I just wanted to retire, but I had no idea how to plan fire and all that sort of thing. But this is really helpful. So, talking about your situation,
My question to you would be, why do you want to
right?
fire? Have you given that some
Right,
thought?
right. I was coming to that question as to why. I mean, what was your thought? Like, why? What will I do after doing it? For me, yeah, if you ask me, I actually thought of retiring in 2019. I actually never thought about fire or the specific amount, but I just wanted to retire wildly. So I took that decision, but on the day of resigning, I got cold feet and I actually did not retire. I did not resign. I kept working on. And till now, I have not been able to take that step again. I'm still working in the job. So that's why I wanted to understand about how to plan it, right? The way you are saying that, plan it and then you will not get the cold feet on the last day,
Fair,
right?
fair. So that's absolutely true. That's the financial part of it. My reasoning for fire, and I don't really understand why anyone else who has a different reasoning would, is I didn't like the job that I was
Okay.
in. And not just the job, I didn't like the career that I was in.
Okay.
So I used to work in the edtech
Mm-hmm.
sector. Now, when I started working in the edtech sector, it was really, really nice. Everything was very good. I was one of the early ones who started doing stuff on YouTube and selling educational courses online, etc. But by the time in 2022 is when I pulled the plug, the sector had
Mm-hmm.
changed. And the sort of stuff that happens in the edtech sector in India right now, I don't want to be involved in that. It's very bad, depressing. It's not something that I would want to be associated with. Now, if you have worked in a certain field for 15 years or
Mm-hmm.
10 years and something like that, I can't really start my career elsewhere in some other field at
Mm-hmm.
40. And if I was forced to, maybe I would. But once I have the money, I don't really have a need
Right.
to, build another career or another domain. And that's why I decided to pull the plug. To think of it as the analogy of a knife in your back. So once your job or your career starts to feel like a knife in the back, which it did for me,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that you do is, boss, you take the knife out.
Right.
Once you take the knife out, it doesn't mean that your wound is going to
Mm-hmm.
heal. Your wound will still be there. Your wound will still be a problem. There will still be issues that you will have with it. But it is better than having a knife in the back. So I'm not saying that fire is the solution to all problems. It is better than working in a job that you hate, that you detest to such levels that you start ruining your life over it. And uh, jobs can be stressful. They can have an impact on your family as well. They can have an impact on your mental health. They can have an impact on your physical health. My friends in US tell me that it's not really that much of a problem there, because worker protection is there. People don't yell at you. There are timings. You have the weekends off, and your weekends off means you have weekends
Right.
off. It's unlikely that your boss is going to call you to office on a Sunday or anything like that. So, but that's not really the case in India. The working conditions are fairly bad. You will have your boss messaging you at 6 a.m. on a Saturday on WhatsApp and expect a response in the next 2, 3
Mm-hmm.
years. I'm not saying all jobs are like that, but there are a lot of jobs which are like
Yeah.
that. So if you absolutely hate your job, if there is no other option left, then fire gives you that independence that, okay, I have the money, I choose not to work.
Mm-hmm.
That choice is important. If you are impacted outside your office hours, be it physically or mentally or in your relationships, then you should seriously consider fire. On the other hand, if it doesn't, then you should not consider it. And if you actually enjoy it, there are a lot of people who enjoy their
Mm-hmm.
jobs as well. Boss, then you should never retire, never fire. Keep doing it, keep continuing it as long as you can. There are some of my friends actually like to spend more time at their office because they find their homes a lot more stressful with their kids and their wives and their families. Okay, fine, the weekends are there, but if I go back home early, I'll have to deal with X, Y, or Z. So I'll spend an extra hour in office. People
Yeah,
do that.
that's interesting.
So if you actually like your job so much, stay away from
Right.
fire. So decision should be made based on
Yeah.
that.
In fact, to your point about Indian work culture, it's the same in US also. If you're working in an Indian company, the things are
Ah,
completely different in US
okay,
companies, but with Indian companies, because those
yes,
managers have got their training in India, so they just want to give back what they got from their manager, and they repeat the same story about calling on weekends, working on weekends, and no privacy, nothing of that sort. I've heard it from many many
fair,
people.
fair. Maybe, maybe. See, most of my network in the
Uh-huh.
US is essentially, people who work in
Uh-huh.
tech. So some of them are working in Microsoft and Amazon and Facebooks of the
Uh-huh.
world. So there,
Yeah.
obviously, things are fairly okay. But there are a few of them who are working in smaller tech companies, which you and I would have probably not even
Right.
heard of. Broadly, the people who are working in tech, they have fairly comfortable work
Yeah.
culture and something that they like and something that they enjoy. And even so, there is a friend of mine who's working in the banking
Hmm.
sector. You know, uh, I don't think I should name the company, but a fairly well-established bank in the
Hmm.
US. There also things are pretty
Hmm.
chill. I keep talking to him and saying, okay, no man, what I've seen in movies is that banking is very toxic and problematic, and these. So he says that yes, that exists in a very small portion of banking. Let's say something like an investment banking and stuff, and even in that, it exists for people who want that. So if you're earning, $200,000 and you want a bonus of another $200,000, then you need to push yourself and work 70 hour
Yeah.
weeks. If you're okay with the $200,000, you just do your work. No one, you're not going to get fired if you don't work 70 weeks. You do your job. Yes, you will not get the bonuses and the promotions, but you can very easily live your life
Right.
comfortably. And I have friends who works in a paper company over there, and you at least have that
Right.
choice
Right.
in a lot of companies, that how hard do you want to
Right.
work.
Right.
In India, whether you work in, even if you work in a government
Uh-huh.
bank, which is at least people our age, when we were in
Yeah.
school, it used to be the best job was
Government
ki, acha,
job.
हाँ, sarkari bank, government job in a bank used to be the most comfortable and safe and
Uh-huh.
peaceful sort of jobs. That's definitely not the case anymore. Even if you are in a government bank job, the pressures are immense in
Mm-hmm.
India. You will have managers yelling at you publicly, in front of customers. It's a pretty crappy situation. So, yes, if you are in a crappy situation
Okay.
in a job, then fire makes sense. But if you love your job, forget it. No one will be even thinking of it. As long as you do not hate your job, fire isn't
Right.
really for you.
So let's talk about your case. When you were thinking about retiring, did this thought ever cross your mind that your friends at the same level which you regularly socialize with, maybe making money, or they will be progressing in their career, while you will be having an abrupt stop, and then you don't know whether the market will do good or not. Your social
Uh,
status might go down.
boss, I was.
No.
I get your
Uh-huh.
question, and
Biggest, I think,
that
dilemma in the mind is that people will move ahead and I'll curse
will
myself that
be
why
let
did I
down.
leave
So
it?
absolutely. So I think I made that mistake very early in my
Mhm.
career. So uh, if you look at in terms of how secure I am financially, I'll probably be in the bottom 10% of my batch,
Okay.
because my friends, my batch has done so well. Just to give you a brief background, I did computer science engineering at IIT Kharagpur in
That's
early
that's probably
2000s.
the number one,
Uh,
right, in India, Kharagpur.
yes, yeah, at that it's not really number one, but it's one of the top
Right, right.
colleges in India, and I would say nearly 75 to 80% of my batchmates are already in the US. I would say a bulk of them would be making more than 500K a year, because think about it, someone who has been in Google for 18 years,
Mm-hmm.
someone who has been in Facebook for 12
Mm-hmm.
years. So financially, I have been in the bottom 10% for a very, very long
Okay.
time. So when I quit, I was in the bottom
Okay.
10%. What will happen eventually? I'll get to the bottom
Okay.
5%. So this the problem that you are talking about is true for someone who is maybe at the middle or maybe at the
Okay.
top. For a failure who has been at the bottom, for a career failure, let's say, because I was never able to build a career where I was able to go to the US or work in big tech
Mm-hmm.
companies or make $500,000 a year. Friends have already moved so far ahead that me stopping right now would not make a difference. It's a race that I've already lost, so no point keep on running.
Yeah, and to add to your point, this race will never end. There is no end to how much you can earn.
Yes, absolutely. There will always be people who will be ahead of you and all of that. But I think that's what people say. They do believe different. It still hurts me a lot when I think about some of the career decisions that I have made, which have put me in this sort of situation where everyone in my class is far richer than I am. So it does put you down at points of time, but again, part of life, man. There is nothing that I can do to change it. And even if I kept working, it wouldn't have made any difference. See, what will I be doing? So I am worth somewhere between a million to 2 million right now. That's broadly the range. Even if I kept on working, what will happen? I'll get to a 1.1, a 1.2. The average of my batch would probably be in the 5 to 10 million net worth
Mm-hmm.
range. And that's the average.
Okay.
The good ones are far, far ahead
Okay.
of that. So even if I kept on working for my entire life, right now I'm saying I'm firmly in the 1 to 2 range. Even if I kept on working for the next 10 years, I would have moved from the 2 to 3 range. I will still be at the close to the bottom, so there is no point.
So
Does it hurt? Yes, it hurts. There is no doubt about it. It hurts, but nothing you can do about it.
so what essentially is the crux of this thing is that you are looking at the mental health part of it, basically what is giving you happiness in your life rather than what somebody else is earning, even though they were in the same batch or the same class or at the same level. It doesn't matter what they do in their life. It is what matters is that you are happy in your life with whatever you done or whatever you are able to do, the power of doing what you want to
I,
do
I would
every day.
I would say I am not unhappy.
Okay.
I'll not say that I'm happy with all of
Uh-huh.
this. I'm saying that I have eliminated a problem from my life.
Okay.
Job, career was a problem.
Okay.
And that problem is now gone. It does not mean that I have found the meaning or I'm
Okay.
immensely happy or anything like that. It's just that, yes, if the TV in your house is not
Uh-huh.
working, you get a new TV, so that problem is fixed. But that does not mean that you have something to watch interesting on the TV or you are able to enjoy the TV
Okay.
right now. To enjoy the TV, you need a TV series to watch or a movie to watch. So I'm not saying that I have the TV series or the movie. All I have done is I have removed the broken TV and I've gotten a new TV in. Does that solve the problem? You are not watching anything on the broken TV. You're not watching anything on the new TV. One problem that the TV is no longer broken. That problem is
Okay.
removed. Does not mean that you are
So
entertained.
basically, the journey to find yourself or your passion continues even after you have retired. The day-to-day struggle about what to
Absolutely.
do. Are
Absolutely.
most people able to find that calling, or you're still looking for it? How is it? What is your experience?
I don't know, man. The people that I talk to, not everyone is open about it
Uh-huh.
for some reason. People don't really discuss this stuff
Right.
that openly. At least people in my circle don't. So I don't know what's happening with others. For myself, yes, the struggle is there. It will be foolish to deny that I'm struggling in certain aspects with not having anything to do, with the fall in social prestige that I have seen 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I was happy to introduce myself that I'm an
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur, I'm a businessman, I do this, I do that. I have nothing of that sort.
So what?
The way people
So how do
treat
you
you
introduce
is
yourself now? That
different.
I do nothing. What do you say about your?
So I typically say that uh, I don't really have a good answer to this. It doesn't really come up that often because most people I'm meeting these days, they already know who I am. So
Okay.
I don't really have the opportunity to introduce myself that much. But sometimes when it does happen, I typically go with, I am working on building my YouTube channel right now.
Okay.
That's the line that I go with. And if any of you watching, you should check out the
Uh-huh.
channel. It's called Desi Fire
Uh-huh.
Podcast. Most of the content is in
Uh-huh.
Hindi. So I don't know how much it would work for the US audience, but you can check that out. But yes, it is a problem. And so much so, if you go to your kid's school,
Uh-huh.
the form that they give you, they ask
The profession.
you uh, your profession on that. I remember I filled the form as retired initially. When I was going to submit in the form, my wife told me that no, this will not work. We can't say something like this. It's going to look good. Then on the other form, I wrote businessman. And even if I'm making 3 lakh rupees a
Uh-huh.
year, it is still a business.
Right.
Now, coincidentally, the guy who runs the school, who's in a director or a manager, he knew me beforehand as well. So wasn't really too much of a
Okay.
problem.
Okay, that's nice. So when you thought about your fire retirement, did you actually write down what you're going to do in your day-to-day activities? Like you had something in your mind, or you just thought only about that
I
number?
did have some things in my mind. Say, for example, starting a YouTube channel was one of
Okay.
the things that
Yeah,
I
fair enough.
wanted to do. I have been fairly involved in quizzing, so to say. So I wanted to do a bit more of that. I made quizzes for a few websites. I still I participate in a lot of quizzes every now and then. Very recently, just last month, I live in Jaipur. I went to Bombay just to take part in a quiz.
Take
Uh, this is the sort of stuff that I
Take
would
part in the sense that you
take part.
were anchoring the show or what?
No, I was a contestant.
Oh, okay.
Contestant. So that so contesting in quizzes is not something that I was able to do before because Jaipur doesn't have that
Uh-huh.
many, and you can't just fly to Bombay just to take part in an
Quiz, yeah.
event.
Right. So now you,
Yeah, so now I can do that.
right, right.
So
And do you find it difficult
so
to socialize with your friend circle because they are not available on Monday to Friday schedule?
not really, man, because how much do you really need to socialize as
Uh-huh.
well? How much do you so think about it realistically? The amount of socializing that I used to do, frankly speaking, has gone
Uh-huh.
up after retirement because a when I was working, even on the weekends, even if I had the time, I didn't really have the energy or the motivation to go out and meet
Mm-hmm.
people that much. Now I do. So let's say if you're a friend of mine and we used to meet once a month because sometimes he's busy, I am busy, he's available, I am not available, I have the mood, he's not in
Hmm.
the mood. Now we'll probably be meeting twice a month
Right.
because I can adjust my schedule accordingly. So for my social life, definitely it has been a huge positive impact. I'm able to meet a lot of new people as
Okay.
well.
Online.
For example, if you wanted to do online and
Okay.
offline. So suppose you contacted me for this particular
Mm-hmm.
session, I was more than happy to do it. If I was in a job, I would not even think twice and just say, sorry, boss, I won't be
Right.
able to
Right.
do it until and unless this happens or that happens, or my boss tells me that no, 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 you need to do this or something like that. Then I live in Jaipur, which is very much a touristy city in India. So what happens is a lot of friends, a lot of people who keep visiting Jaipur, and I am connected to
Mm-hmm.
them via my college or online, etc. They come to Jaipur and they say, okay, Handa, I want to meet up. I would be more than
Mm-hmm.
happy to meet with people, and I do keep on meeting people this way. When I was in a job, even if my close friends came, it became a challenge to they are here for a period of 3 days to find time for me and him and his wife and my wife and all of us meeting because they are also on a holiday, have a limited
Mm-hmm.
time, I am also working, I have limited amount of time. Many a times I was not even able to meet friends. Now I have the time to meet absolutely random people who I got in touch with 3 months ago via Twitter, for example, and I'm happy to do that.
That's interesting. Think, do you have any courses for fire, or do you have any consultation services?
No, nothing like that. I thought of doing it, but what happens is once money gets
Mm-hmm.
involved, it comes with a certain set of
Right.
responsibility. So, suppose if I do a consultation with
Mm-hmm.
you, I would be very, very happy to
Okay.
do it. I think it's a very good use of my
Uh-huh.
time. I think it's a very good use of my
Okay.
talent. It's a very good use of my learnings. Say, for example, for anyone who is planning to fire, has a certain amount of money, how to invest. I would love to do that. I enjoy that. But if I charge any amount for
Uh-huh.
it, then it becomes my responsibility to be available to you, to discuss stuff with you at the time that you want to do it, etc. I'm no longer doing you a favor if I charge
Right. Right.
money from you. That is why I would always want to do it. I don't know about always, but as of right now, I would want to do it as a favor so that I do it with you. If and ever we ever end up meeting somewhere, I'll say that, boss, I did you a favor, now
Mm-hmm.
you treat me to beer and we have a good time. I would prefer that. Involving money makes it a little bit uncomfortable. So suppose you ask me, "Ki, Handa, I have a channel, can you help me promote my YouTube channel, can you tweet about it?" Yes, I will do it. Give me this much amount of money. We'll figure that out. But for something important, if you want consultation from me for fire or how to do it, that's important stuff. That's not
Right.
random stuff that I'm doing. For that, I don't want any money. I don't want money to come
But
in.
you're still available for people to contact you and discuss their financials?
Absolutely.
Okay.
More than happy to talk. It'll help me fill up some of my time in an interesting way. So I'll be more than happy to do it. True.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I've spoken a lot about you and your things, and thanks for sharing everything so frankly and honestly. I really appreciate it. That's it from my side, and I hope to connect again with you sometime if I have more
Oh,
questions.
sure. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Let's do this
Hmm.
again sometime because I would really like to get some more
Hmm.
perspective from people like you who are in the US and are planning to move back to India at some point of time, if that is what you thought of. Because firing in India for NRIs is going to be a lot easier than firing in the US. The amount of money that you will need for
Right,
US is going to
right,
be
right,
significantly higher than the amount of money that you will need to maintain the exact same type of lifestyle
right, right,
in India would be a lot cheaper.
right,
So I would like to explore that at some stage someday.
right,
So let's keep in
right, right.
touch.